love and longing. Some final, deep-down part of her soul unclenches when she sees the tapestry. The ancient piece of artwork was the first thing that jumped out at her in the Empress's palace when she had first earned her crown as battle princess, and here it still was, welcoming her back with all its overly glorified images of Apuk excellence. The image of a sorcerer being seduced out of his forest with nothing more than the presence of a battle princess, rather than the absolutely brutal battle it actually takes to pry them out of the trees, makes her smirk at the reminder of her husband. Yarichar cracked her neck and smiles to herself. She had already had a wonderful night with her husband and daughters. But apparently there was surprise. He was keeping cutely coy about that he wanted her to uncover. That her sister wives and daughters were in on it as well just made it all the more interesting. No doubt she'll stumble across it today, but she was already pushing things for her report back to the Empress. 16 hours of rest and reconnection was all well and good, but if she went over a standard day and night without officially reporting in that, would be a bit of a smear on her otherwise impeccable reputation. You don't become the fang of the Empress by slacking. She takes a left turn at the tapestry after looking at it one final time, wondering only for a moment which of the many styles of dress upon it were currently in vogue with the nobility, and heads directly to the throne room. The gateway is closed, and at her questioning glance the guards simply nod towards the right, to the gardens. Not that they'd need to, as at that very moment the sound of warfire and clashing metal rings out. Training duels, of course. She nods her thanks to the hard-working women and follows the direction. On the approach, she starts to hear something else, a strange music that's being played with clearly unskilled fingers. There's a halting pattern to it, then a jangled clash of notes as whoever's playing has clearly made a mistake that's answered by the delighted laughter of babes. Whoopsie! An unfamiliar male voice sing-songs out, and there are happy squeals that answer. Did Daddy make a mistake? What do you think? Wordless babbling and gurgles answer the question even as Yarichar crosses the final threshold out into the gardens. No less than 25 meters away, her sisters in arms were dueling each other with blades coated in warfire that easily weighed 3 to 4 times as much as they did. The Empress was overseeing the duel with a smile. More oddly, however, is the source of the music. To the left, and only 10 meters away, is what appears to be a Tret man with short golden hair who is playing a large and strange instrument for 8 little Apuk girls spread out and propped up on a blanket to watch. They're all extremely young, but clearly paying attention as their father entertains them. The man has already noticed her, but he is supremely unconcerned and merely salutes before going back to a book with strange alien text she cannot read, and once again playing the instrument. This time the song is sprightly, simple and flawless as he gives a fast-paced little performance that has the little girls wiggling or trying to thrash their limbs to the sound. Yarichar places the strange but clearly friendly and welcome alien from the forefront of her mind as she walks through the garden, giving the father and children plenty of space, and approaches her Empress. "Milady, I have returned victorious from my quest," she says, curtsying to her Empress so deeply that her dress pools around her. "Rise, Yarichar. I won't have any of my battle princesses supplicate pointlessly." The Empress tells her, and she rises again, then receives a hug before being held at arm's length. "It's good to see you again. A successful hunt means there's a glorious story to go with it. Shall we weave it into a tapestry?" Not as such, milady. The criminal witch was elusive but far from capable in battle, spending all her resources to escape and leaving herself with nothing to fight with when I finally caught her. Few foes are able to endure a stern chase lasting decades. Her body is under stasis to have whatever justice is deemed appropriate done to it. But after so long, I am content with my quarry dead and done with. I can imagine Elusive foes may not be the most dangerous, but they can be the most aggravating. The Empress confirms. I'm told you have a bit of a mystery to unravel from your family. Truly nothing is beyond your reach, my Empress. And yes, my husband's sister wives and daughters have conspired together to give me a house-warming game of sorts now that my quest has finished. Yarichar smiles at the idea. I do love them so, but I'm a little weary, worn of mysteries and tracking. Then I will aid you, my dear princess. I can tell you that not only is one of the younger princesses here aware of the mystery in its fullness, but her husband is far more well-versed in the surprise. The Empress says with a smile, Thank you, my Empress. Now please, I beg of your forgiveness for interrupting this training session. I know very well how important it is to ensure that the greatest blades of the Apuk remain sharp, she says, before stepping well away from the dueling circle. Although I would like to say that I'm very happy to see so many new sisters in battle. Oh yes, 59 new battle princesses to add to the ranks. The Empress states in that amused tone of hers where she knows she's about to get a reaction. 59? Yarichar asks. What happened? The best person to ask is playing to his daughters over there. He can also help you with your mystery if you wish it, the Empress says, pointing towards the Tret-looking alien who waves back genially. Apparently, he's listening too, despite being in the middle of a song he clearly hasn't mastered yet. Of course, my Empress, please. Excuse me, she says, and starts a stately walk around the practice field. She catches sight of the alien man blowing a kiss to one of the princesses, and the gesture is returned by a young Apuk woman with slightly darker skin and crimson hair. Clearly she's either his first wife, or he's a very affectionate member of his species. Whatever it is, she's fairly certain he's no Tret. Hello, madam. The man greets her as his fingers dance over the keys of the large instrument before a discordant note plays out and his daughters erupt into laughter and infantile cheers. He shakes his hand and presents a silly face to the girls and gets more laughter out of them. How may I help you? Well, I'd like to introduce myself first. I am Yarichar, wife of Brinchar, Fang of the Empress and mother of Furuchar, Narichar and Marachar. Constantly moving as you have dedicated your life to setting the standard for your fellow battle princesses and living as an example for all to follow. He says, and she pauses. Oh, how do you know? I'm certain you'll figure it out in no time, milady, however. Here is the hint you so want. The surprise is related to how I know. Is it because you know my husband? Yarichar asks, amused despite herself. No, however, the commonality makes it so that whether I've met him or not, I would have learned regardless. Does that help? At the moment, no. But I have the suspicion it's one of those hints that makes a great deal more sense when looked at through the backwards lens, she notes. Sorry, I'd tell you directly, but I don't think Bryn Char would like that much. We're not that close as friends, but I do respect him. So, sorry. He answers with a slightly rueful shrug. He then stands up while looking towards the dueling area instead and lets out a loud whistle before cheering. You can do it, honey. Show them that a noir is untouchable. He cheers and Yarichar turns to see the young battle princess that is clearly his wife squaring up with her opponent. A large curved war spear dancing in her hands. A good weapon, it gives reach and a long lever to apply one's strength to. The hook on the back part of the blade can disarm, trip, and control the enemy as well. It also has a rather fierce reputation for pulling defenders clean out of windows during sieges and having no places to grip without shredding one's hands near the head. Unless you were very quick to reinforce them with axiom or already had armored gauntlets on. His cheer given, he watches gleefully as his wife proves quite adept with the war spear, and after several clanging passes lets out a breath of war fire that disrupts the air and disguises her movements rather than directly attacking. There is a mighty clash of metal on metal and a slight cry of shock as the weapon of his wife's opponent is sent spinning into the air, directly towards him. Yari-Char moves to intercept, but the weapon gets inexplicably caught in the wispy branches of the tree he's next to. "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," he says, standing up and stepping past her. The weapon slips out of the branches at that exact moment and the large blade falls into his waiting hands. He catches it by the handle and the flat, completely unconcerned by the clear danger of such a thing. The sheer weight of the blade would drag anyone unprepared down to the ground. He wasn't moved in the slightest. It may as well have been a thin stick to him. He clearly mimes out the throw, then tosses the extremely heavy war sword like a light stick, and it lands nearly perfectly in the hand of his wife's opponent. Yari-Char had felt nothing in the axiom from all that. The man was touching it so lightly, it was a wonder if he even knew how. But his actions— "You're allowed to ask questions, you know," he states in a genial tone as he starts playing again. "Such as, 'Why you haven't introduced yourself to me yet?' she asks, and his fingers freeze on the keys and the notes are held. Well, how does that work? What kind of instrument is this? Maybe she can ask that as a question. I am very sorry. I get distracted around my family. I mean, who wouldn't? Look at how cute those little angels are. Aren't they just adorable?" He apologizes, then immediately turns around to coo at his daughters. Then he turns back. "My name is Vernon Shea. I am a soldier and informal researcher for the Undaunted, the first human-led nation outside of cruel space." So the rumors were true? Some race was discovered in the null? "Yes, my home world is so deep in the stuff the trip out is 4 months long, even with the best engines one can build," he says. "And you're an axiom researcher? With some kind of trick that hides your disruption to the axiom?" Yari asks. "Something like that. Although it's no trick, it's just an obsessive amount of practice. Anyone can do this," he says, before holding out his hand, and from above, a bright red and round fruit drops neatly into it from the non-flowering, non-fruiting tree above. "Okay, not that exactly, but you understand my meaning." She leans back somewhat and takes another look at him. He offers a fearless smile and she looks up at the tree. The leaves. They're very vibrant and a few shades darker than normal. "I see. Well, aren't you a catch? Passionate, studious, dutiful, sorceress, and exotic. I'm almost jealous," she says. "But the Bone Chewer is a very tough act to follow," Vernon says, even as he pulls out a series of 8 mesh bags with plastic backings and deposits chunks of the apple into the bags. "A moment, please." He then places the little mesh bags with fruit chunks into the mouths of his daughters, and they immediately start gumming at the bags for the sweet juices. "Is that safe for them?" Yari-Char asks. "It likely is, even if this new race are herbivorous in nature. Small amounts of plant matter are harmless to even the youngest Apuk." "Oh yes, we've tested them. They've inherited my robust digestive system. Even if they hadn't, apples are so inoffensive as food that you could have one without issue. Just don't eat the seeds and you're fine," he remarks as he holds out his left hand and another shining red fruit drops into it. "No thank you. Still, non-Apuk sorcerers. I have missed much. Where were you?" "Hunting. When there is a crime against the Empress herself that escapes immediate reprisal, a princess can be sent after them upon a quest to track them down and bring them to justice. They can grow rather tedious when they retreat into wild space and hunker down to avoid attention." "I see. Did you run into anything interesting out there?" 3 worlds with primitive races rising into personhood. I've registered them properly, and one of which had deadly megafauna all over it, so it will likely become a popular hunting hotspot in the future." "Your target was on that world, wasn't she?" Ruling the primitives like a goddess and having them ride the giant beasts as her mounted warriors, wasn't she? Almost. She was starting to make movements towards that when I caught her. Good job. That would have been a mess. It is a mess, but it would have been far larger if I hadn't caught her, Yarichar says before nodding. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but the surprise is I not only have a son from one of my sister wives, but he's a sorcerer in some way. A moment, please, Vernon says and closes his eyes. The tree shivers and then he opens them again. Close. Very close. Would you like to see? Well, She begins before feeling something appear behind her. She turns sharply and the hem of her dress brushes against the ankle of her husband and the boy bearing his features to his immediate left. Oh my goodness, you're adorable. Oh, who was lucky enough to have such a handsome son? Was it Ari? She's always had a strange lucky streak. Actually, this happy turn of events was due to my selling sperm to pay to get a new business off the ground. Then Miss Crushclaw got very lucky, and Darechar is here now. And a sorcerer, too. How did that happen? Did something bad happen? You look quite well balanced. Has something happened to drive you to the dark forest? No, Darechar asks, before giving Brynchar a look. His father merely smiles at him. He's interrupted by the sudden crying of one of the babes, and even as they turn to regard her, she's already being picked up and gently patted on the back by Vernon. What are you? Yarichar begins to ask before the baby lets out a tremendous burp and sends a mixture down Vernon's back. The more robust digestion has some side effects, especially when my little sweeties are still growing, Vernon explains. Oh dear. Excuse me, Mironoir says as she departs from the training group to walk over towards Vernon. It seems like my little one just lost her lunch, my poor baby. Well, thankfully, Mommy is here to make it all better, Vernon replies as he lightly dabs away the baby's mess from her chin. Mironoir takes the baby from him and he takes off the jacket he's wearing before there's a tiny, barely perceptible whisper of axiom, and the filth running down the back of it is simply gone. You sent that to the dark forest, didn't you? Darechar asks. Makes good fertilizer,